Hey man, power to the people, peace and love. Chronicles of an Old Hippy, Part 4. Promised you I was going to get to the 68 Democrat National Convention. I might not make it there, man. I'm still trying to build up to it, so a couple things I've thought about or didn't talk about, I'm going to try and put together now. 1968 was a really rough time because it was kind of like when integration was really happening, man. And see, up until that point, most cities were like white, and on the outskirts you had black neighborhoods, and on the outskirts you might have Mexican neighborhood or Puerto Rican neighborhoods or whatever. But man, most cities were just white, and so like there was a lot of racial tension in 1968 that I mentioned before, but it was really getting bad. And so like there was groups starting up and gangs, but not in the sense of a gang like today where, you know, flashing signs and shooting each other and turf wars and all that. That existed on a smaller scale, but back then, like, if you were in a beef with another gang, you would just box. I mean, you'd punch each other and fight each other. You might bring bats or clubs, but man, hardly anybody shot at anyone else, and stabbings were even rare. But gangs were forming on two fronts now, see, and it wasn't, like I said, like today. Back then, gangs were forming because people were trying to protect their neighborhoods. And yeah, a lot of it was racially motivated. White people didn't want black people moving into their neighborhoods. They thought it would like lower the mortgage rates, and the values of the homes would go down and stuff. And so a lot of these gangs formed to scare other people out of their neighborhoods. But these gangs were really something different, man. They were really just groups of people coming together in their neighborhood to stay together with people in their neighborhood. And in Chicago, where I'm from, see, I got to kind of speak from where I'm from because I can't say what really happened in New York and Los Angeles, but there was gangs. Most of them were groups of a particular gang called the Gaylords, and the Gaylords had different sets, which were at the time called sects or sections, like in different parts of Chicago, depending on the neighborhood you were in, or the park you lived near, or the street corner that you claimed as your turf or whatever. And then those groups started coming together as greasers. They were all greasers, man. And this was a thing that like started in the 40s and 50s, where greasers were guys that they slicked their hair back, and they wore like leather jackets, black pants, black shirts, and they wore these cardigan sweaters, and each gang wore a different color cardigan to identify their group. And they were more into things like cars and motorcycles than anything else, you know. Now, at the same time, moving in town were groups of black folks, and there was groups of Latinos, and they were all basically forming these organizations not to fight each other color-wise, but to just band together with people from their own group. See, there was the Young Lords, which were Puerto Ricans, were proud of their heritage, and they hung around together, and they formed these big groups. And there was the Latin Kings and a few other gangs that came out of that. But remember, this was not gangs like now. These were just people that were hanging together to protect themselves in their own neighborhoods. And in the black neighborhoods, there were black gangs. Black Peastone Rangers is one I can think of right now. And then, you know, the Black Panthers were a movement starting in California that was very strong in Chicago. And they were gathering to keep blackness black. Okay, there's no other way to say it, man. That's the way it was. But we weren't all fighting as gangs against each other by color or anything, man. We were just fighting this common struggle that we weren't aware of yet, man. So like we had hippies, which were also called freaks. Yeah, people were proud to be a freak. If you were a freak, you didn't cut your hair, and you flew your freak flag. And Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young had songs about almost cut my hair and letting my freak flag fly and all that. And that's what freaks were, man. They were proud to be who they were, and they flew under the colors of freaks, which was a peace sign on a tie-dyed background or whatever. And there were the greasers and the freaks and the Latinos, the Young Lords and the Black Panthers, and then there was groups of others like Socias. Remember I talked about the money folks and all that. And what we realized is that we were all fighting on different battlegrounds, but we all had a common enemy, the man. Yeah, we were all against the establishment, man. And we started to realize that in about 1968. And so we started to come together, and we had these papers, these underground newspapers that, like in Chicago, there was one called The Seed, and that was like the hippies' main form of communicating with each other. And that was part of the UPS, which was the Underground Paper Syndicate. And if you published something in Chicago, it would go to San Francisco and Los Angeles and New York. And so instead of each city writing their own paper about the same struggle, it would come across this syndicate and it would go nationwide, man. And so people would see the same thing and would be fighting the same struggle. And this is how we began to realize that instead of fighting each other and being angry with each other, we needed to fight together. Because here I was saying power to the struggle, and here they were saying power to the people. And man, if we clasped our hands and came together as one big group, well, we were a force to be reckoned with. 1968 was the time that was really beginning to gel, man. The Black Panthers were allowing certain people that were cool to come and speak to them. The YLO was letting people come in that were cool to speak to them. And I just happened to be one of these people that was lucky enough to work with one of these underground newspapers, man. Photography, and I drew comics and wrote articles and stuff. And so because of that, I got into these other groups and got to see things other people didn't see, and hear things and speak to other people, and we began to see, as this happened, that we were all fighting a common force. And man, I was so freaked out because I was looking online tonight and I saw a guy that had a collection of underground papers, and one of them was The Seed. And it was The Seed that came out just prior to the '68 Democrat National Convention. And man, it was like the roadmap of how to get to Chicago, what to do when you got there, where your group should gather, what to do if you were arrested, who to call, phone numbers of certain organizations so you could get a hold of people you needed to get a hold of, where medical clinics were going to be set up, and everything. It was the giant form, and it was the map, and it was how everything was going to come together at the convention. And man, I remember having that thing, and I remember drawing on it, where I was going to go with my friends, and they were allowing camping in the parks. We were going to go hang at this park, and oh man, when I saw the guy had that, I was so envious. I sent him an email. I'm green with envy. Man, I just saw that thing. I wanted it so bad, but there it sat on The Seed. There was the Rising Up Angry newspaper in Chicago, which catered to the other groups, and particularly they had the Stone Grease Grapevine, which was the newsletter portion for the greasers. All of our groups were coming together to fight this common evil we called the man, or the establishment. And man, some people were really revolutionary, and they thought there was going to be some dying, some killing going on. But we were peace and love, man. We weren't into all of that. So we were trying to make this whole thing gel together in a peaceful way. And if you know anything about history and what happened at the '68 Democrat National Convention, you'll realize that it just didn't happen that way, man. And so I'm going to get to that in a whole separate story, because it's a whole different thing. But this underground newspaper thing came to me, and I thought, I talk about that and point out really one basic thing, that even though we were all different in skin color and we were all different in nationality, race, creed, and all that, as I said before, man, we came together and we fought this struggle together. And so instead of me fighting with you and you fighting with me, you and me get together and fight the man. So that was part of what was being a hippie was all about, was being the peacemakers in these gathering groups. That's all I'm going to tell you about right now, because these are running too long and I don't want people to lose interest. So peace and love, man, and power to the people, and I'll see you in part 5.